All right. Hello, everyone in podcast land. Welcome to this week's episode.
On this week's episode of the podcast, we talk about Samsung's upcoming Unpacked event, where they want you to unfold your world.
We talk about Netflix earnings call and how it isn't as bad as they predicted.
And we talk about Hyundai's future of EVs, what they plan EVs will look like in the next 5 years.
Okay, on to topic number one. Samsung Mobile's Twitter account posted, a trio of images to their official Twitter account. And it was a bit of a cryptic puzzle for people to decipher and, decrypt, but wasn't too difficult. It's not super complicated. If you wanted, you could check it out. The message pretty much says Samsung's next Unpacked event will be on August 10th. Now, it hasn't officially been confirmed by Samsung, but everyone who's decoded the message has seen that. Rumors about what to expect at the event, it seems like it's going to be Samsung's next generation of foldables and smartwatches. So the Z Flip 4, the Z Fold 4, the Galaxy Watch 5, and Watch 5 Pro. Now, as is typical, Android fashion, or just typical smartphone fashion these days, there have been leaks. There's been a leak of what the Z Flip 4 is supposed to look like since about mid-May, and it looks pretty identical to last year's model. I mean, it was widely received as a great foldable phone, sort of like a foldable phone for everyone. As opposed to, a large tablet in your pocket. It's a much more traditional form factor when unfolded. The Z Fold 4 looks fairly similar because it's been leaked also. It looks fairly similar, but it has a bit of a redesign to the rear camera, which looks like it's kind of taken hints from the Samsung S22 Ultra. Now, speaking of the S22 Ultra, that phone had a silo for an S Pen. So everyone was saying, the Note's dead. But, the S22 Ultra was pretty much a Note. From the renders that have been released so far, there doesn't appear to be an S Pen silo on this device, on the Z Fold 4. Like last year, there wasn't an S Pen silo. You actually had to buy a separate case in order to store your S Pen. Right now, it's kind of pointing towards that. But once again, these are leaks. This hasn't been confirmed by Samsung yet. And the watches have had a bit of a leak. Nothing too drastic of a change with the watches, but their watches do have a physically rotating bezel, which is a very unique feature, which is a feature that a lot of people like. It seems like they're actually going to get rid of it. Now, they're still going to have a capacitive touch bezel, which is nice, but from everyone who's used one, the physically rotating bezel is a very welcome design. It's a very tactile design element to an otherwise digital device. But I guess, what have you seen from these devices? What have you seen from Samsung? Are you excited for their updated foldables and flips and watches, or do you think the foldable space is played out already?
Yeah, so this is going to be an interesting one because, like you mentioned, there has been some leaks, and yes, they're just leaks. They're not confirmed by Samsung, but from what we've seen, the next generation of foldables might be very similar to what we saw in the past, and that includes the Z Flip, which is like the regular almost phone. It's a clamshell folding phone, almost like an old school folding phone, like the Razr is as well. And that was a really cool device. They also brought out the bespoke version where you got to customize it and make the different panels and the side rails, whichever color that you wanted that they offered. They offered like 5 different colors for each. And that was really cool. And like you mentioned, it was well received. This new version, very similar and not really as exciting. The big difference, I think, is that the cover screen is supposed to be a little bit larger. So that's the screen when the device is closed. Which I guess will help you take selfies a little bit better, and also probably give you a little bit more room for reviewing notifications and stuff like that. But even then, it's not a big change. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference for most people. Although I'm pretty sure people aren't going to be going from the Z Flip 3 to the Z Flip 4. It's just going to be a slight upgrade for people who are still on the fence about upgrading a foldable. Out of all the devices, that's the one I'm the most excited about, even though it's not a big difference, just because hopefully this could be an indication that the price might be coming down, because this isn't a radical change in design. Maybe this is just a way of Samsung saying, hey, we can make foldables cheaper. We saw a price decrease from the Z Flip 2 to the Z Flip 3. Hopefully we can see a similar thing where, it's already at like the regular flagship price. Maybe if we can come down a little bit more, it can kind of entice people to take that plunge, even though there's concerns about durability with foldables. The Z Fold, that one's a little tough because, like you mentioned, yes, in the last version they added S Pen support. They added, I believe, the under display front-facing camera, which wasn't very good. We have seen newer versions of that on ZTE phones, so maybe they can upgrade that so where it doesn't look as ugly with the under display selfie camera, or they might get rid of that altogether and just do a regular selfie camera. That being said, I think whether they go either way, it's not going to be that much of an upgrade for people. I think what people want to hear about is durability, maybe improvements to the display in terms of the strength of it and the decrease of that crease. Overall, though, I don't think we're going to be seeing much to that. It does seem like it's going to be a very minor upgrade overall. And with the watches, these are interesting because we have gotten from Google and Samsung in the past that they are now partnering with watches and watchOS going forward. We still haven't seen Pixel watches out in the wild. We've seen hints of it. We saw it revealed, obviously, in the last Google event. But this could be an indication of what we might see from a Pixel watch, considering we already know that a lot of Android-specific features, including Fitbit features, are coming first to Pixel watches and Samsung watches. So maybe we might be able to see a hint of what we might see from an actual Pixel watch from these watches in this event if they show up. But like you mentioned, a lot of this is all surrounded by rumors. The only thing that I think we know for sure is that this is going to be an event focused on foldables. It's going to be in August, which coincides with what it was last year, August 10th this year at around 9 a.m. Eastern time. So yeah, this is like almost an exact year away from what they did last year. So nothing too surprising there. But I think that's at this point the only thing that's really concrete in terms of information that we know. So all of that being said, to me, this is the lesser of the Unpacked events. Obviously, the more exciting one is going to be when we see the next, mainline Galaxy phones and Galaxy Ultras and stuff like that. But I think that's just from my perspective. I've never been super high on foldables as much as I like the Z Flip 3. It's still kind of a niche device. But from where you are, do you think that this could be the next big step for foldables? Or, posing the question you mentioned, do you think maybe foldables aren't reaching the level that maybe people originally thought they would as being this new way of doing smartphones?
I definitely don't think they're reaching it at the moment. Right now, I feel like the Samsungs, or I guess, yeah, Samsung's is the main person in North America, at least, who's making foldables. I think there's other companies in like Europe and Asia that are making them, but I don't think they're reaching the level that they wanted to. I think they expect it to be further along by now. But if there is a price drop like there was before, I think that would go a long way. I think the main thing is people are interested in their devices. They're cool. I mean, people like cool new technology. That's why we make this podcast.
Yeah.
But it's just so expensive, right? And if you're trying to get someone to experiment with a device, it has to be somewhat reasonable. Because if you can, let's say, if you're looking at a phone, even if it's a phone from Samsung, and it's like, well, I like Android and I like Samsung devices, and this new foldable is really cool, but I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know how well it's going to work. I don't even know if I'm going to like this experience. I'm just going to stick with a S22, just a regular S22, right? Like some people will go with the base S22. They won't go with the Plus. They won't go with the Ultra. I know this works. This is good for me. I don't want to experiment. So if you're going to try and get people to move away from their comfort zones, you have to give them some sort of incentive, where you have, it doesn't always have to be monetary, but there has to be something where it's, either this doesn't cost that much, you can get it for close to the same price, or these are all these new functions, all these new things that you can do that you couldn't do on your classic phone, which I think is why the Z Flip 3 was, so widely accepted, is because it was essentially a regular phone, except it could fold smaller, which a lot of people appreciated. It's not like you had to get used to having a bigger device in your pocket or, using a bigger device. So I don't think we've seen the end of foldables.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, we get some price drops. And, speaking of foldables, hopefully the Microsoft Duo 3 comes out and it's closer to what the first version was. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Less buggy, hopefully. And yeah, I'm excited to see what Samsung has, but I think if they don't put an S Pen in the device, this is a huge mistake.
Mm.
Because you put the S Pen in the S22 Ultra, which big device, big screen. It's essentially a Note, just called something different. This foldable, the Galaxy Z Fold, is a perfect device for an S Pen. If you're using an S Pen, you typically want a bigger canvas. You want to do more productivity stuff. This device is for productivity. That's how they pretty much market it. That's how it should be marketed.
Yeah.
So if you then provide S Pen support on a Galaxy Z Fold, but you don't put a S Pen silo in it, or you don't give people an S Pen with the device, I think that is a huge missed opportunity on their end. The Z Flip 3, I mean, yeah, that's just a regular everyday consumer device. But the Z Fold 3 and the Z Fold 4, eventually, those are productivity devices. Those are power user devices.
Mm-hmm.
And people like that want an S Pen, and they don't want to have to worry about buying an extra case for it or, storing it somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're 100% right there. And it's just one of those things where there's a lot of sacrifices with foldables right now. It's not the be-all, end-all device that the price would suggest it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, my question to you is, do you think there's a company out there right now that isn't making foldables that you would like to see make a foldable, whether it's like Nothing or Apple or anyone else out there that you think could potentially do it better than what Samsung is doing right now? Or do you think it's just a limitation of the technology altogether?
Apple and Google.
Mm.
That's who. And I'm surprised that Samsung's isn't as popular. They're foldable, and I think it's really just a price thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think the cameras are as good, but it's kind of, Samsung has pretty good cameras. Not not the best, but they have pretty good cameras. So to me, it's surprising that they don't have a better camera on their foldable. And they should essentially take the S22 Ultra and just add a second screen to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than that. I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into making a smartphone and a foldable. But if we're talking about the best foldable possible, that's what they should do. When I look at what iPhone does, when I look at what Apple does with iPhone, what Apple does with their tablets, if they made a foldable, and that's the thing, they wait until they can make the perfect device, or what they deem to be the perfect device. They want to get everything ironed out. They don't want to deliver something and then they're fumbling with how to promote it and how to produce it. They wait until it's perfect timing from them. But I think if Apple were to come out with a foldable, I think it would do amazing. iPhone has the best cameras. It's pretty much between them and the Google Pixels. They have the best cameras. So if you take an iPhone with that camera quality and you just add a second screen to it, I think that would do amazing. And I think there's a lot of people who have both an iPhone and have a tablet. Now it may be an iPad Pro, not an iPad Mini, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that would like the ability to say, hey, I have an iPhone. I want to open it up, use my Apple Pencil. Boom, you can do that. Same thing with Google. They have great cameras. They have great software, right? They make Android. They used to do tablets. They're getting back into tablets. I could easily see them launch a foldable that's good. And I think the main thing that's holding foldables back is the cameras aren't great and the price is too high. So if companies can have great cameras and have a reasonable price, I think that that'll go a long way for the foldable market. Yes. Yeah. Is there anyone that you would want to see make a foldable? Is there anything that you think the foldable market is missing that could kind of, get more people to change over from traditional candy bar phones to foldable phones?
For the most part, no. But there is one thing that kind of intrigues me. Aesthetically, I think the the Z Flip is such a cool looking device. And I would imagine a mashup of that with the style of the Nothing phone, I think could be really, really cool. Like that white and black kind of contrast design, but with that see-through kind of idea that the Nothing phone has. That being said, I don't think I want Nothing to make that phone. I don't think they do a great job. But let's say, for example, there was a collab between Nothing and Samsung where they could make Nothing Phone 1 inspired Z Flip. I think that would be the coolest, aesthetically pleasing device out there. But other than that, foldables to me, the displays, the durability issues, the prices, it's not at the level where I would feel comfortable ever purchasing one, no matter who it was made by.
Even there was a Microsoft Surface Duo 3 and they got rid of that camera bump on the back and they just had flat slab of glass that could fold.
See, that one's completely different. That one I would 100%. I'm on board for the Z. Not the Z. The Surface Duo 2. I think from what I've seen, there's been some updates in the past. I think the device is incredibly cool. But the reason why I put that separately from the other foldables is because that dodges all the issues that I have with traditional foldables, which is it's one screen with a soft display that folds. Specifically, Microsoft devices are two separate screens, and there's a big seam in the middle, but to me, that's just a much better idea. And I love that device, despite all of the little issues that people have with it. But once again, price is a huge issue. And I don't think Microsoft is doing anything to get that price down anytime soon. With any of their devices, I think all of Microsoft's devices are insanely overpriced. And I think that's just what they're doing so that they're not competing with, other manufacturers that make stuff using their software. So I don't think that's as much as I would be excited about them, making a Surface Duo 3. I still think that no matter what they do, the price is going to be so high that it's going to be hard to be excited about it.
Yeah.
All right. So our next topic is about Netflix. A few months ago, Netflix announced for the first time ever that they were losing subscribers. And that led to a near 70% drop in their stock. They also predicted that there could be a potential 2 million more subscribers that they'd lose by their next quarter, which was right around now. So recently, Netflix has announced that, yes, they did lose more subscribers, but luckily it was a lot less than what they originally planned. They have now lost an additional 970,000 subscribers around there. And one of the reasons why they may have dodged the bullet of losing so much subscribers is they mentioned Stranger Things and the popularity of that content and that season that just passed. It was very successful for Netflix, one of their most successful programs, which they are no stranger to. They have had very successful programs in the past, including Squid Game, which they're gonna be spinning off into multiple series going forward. And clearly that is their like saving grace is, they have some original programming that's generally not what people use Netflix for, but as their original programming starts to grow and starts to become more diverse, it seems to be drawing in some people, which lets them still be able to be the largest streaming service, despite the fact that, in the past few quarters, they have been losing just over 1 million subscribers. Now, that being said, they also announced that going forward, there can be a little bit of optimism. They plan on, wrangling back in an extra 1 million subscribers. And, they're going to do that through a couple of ways. One is going to be content. They have a big blockbuster, high-budget movie coming out soon called The Gray Man, which they hope will, be enough to entice people back onto the service. They are also talking about being more strict about password sharing and account sharing, forcing, people who do share accounts between multiple households to get separate accounts. And then going forward into the near future, they have also confirmed that they're going to be introducing a new cheaper tier that's going to be ad supported to, draw people who may have left because of the price hikes in recent memory for Netflix. So a combination of all of these strategies, including, the potential of adding revenue from ads, separate from just subscriber revenue, is ways that, they feel investors can be a little bit more excited about the platform going forward. Whether or not that happens, we're just going to have to wait and see if they can go back to adding subscribers. That announcement, though, has given a little bit of enthusiasm back to the stock. Like I mentioned, they lost around 70% of value over the past few quarters. And, they're starting to get a little bit crawl back up into the stock price, nowhere near to where it used to be, but that optimism is coming back to investors. So hopefully, Netflix can pay that off. I remain a little skeptical, despite the fact that, I think, in my opinion, Netflix is still the best streaming service. I know, they have a ton of competition with Disney Plus. Amazon's coming out with a lot of brand new IP soon, including Lord of the Rings show, which I'm sure is going to draw a lot of people in. And, Warner Brothers is doing their thing with HBO Max, and as well as their new merger with, is it Discovery?
Yeah, Discovery.
With Discovery. So, their competition is only going to get more fierce, and it's only going to make them more difficult to keep their subscriber base, especially, they are kind of the most expensive option as well. So, yeah, it's going to be tough, I think, for them to gain that extra million subscribers. But if they do, I think investors will come back and see, okay, no, there's still life in Netflix. Plus, there's also Netflix Gaming, which has gotten more and more popular, even though it's still, it's nowhere near where Apple has been in terms of Apple Arcade, but, it's getting up there in terms of recognition. So, yeah, there's a few ways that Netflix is trying to diversify. But, yeah, it still remains to be seen on whether or not they can capitalize and get that growth that people expect. My question to you is, do you think that Netflix is going to be continuing a downturn going forward? Do you think they can gain subscribers back? Do you think their content is good enough? And do you think their strategy of diversifying is good enough in terms of, forcing account sharers to get their own accounts?
I think they're going to continue on the downturn. I think it's going to slow down. I don't think they're going to lose as much. I think they'll lose less than 970,000. But I don't think they're going to completely reverse their direction. I mean, part of the reasons they gave for, I guess, their slow in revenue growth in the last quarter was competition, like you mentioned, account sharing, like you mentioned, a sluggish economy, and the war in Ukraine. So those were their main reasons, among some other things. But if we look at them losing people and we look at competition isn't going away. As you mentioned, it's only getting bigger and bigger, right? When we look at Amazon, when we look at Disney Plus, when we look at HBO, when there are so many streaming services that are popping up, I don't think that aspect of it is going to stop pulling people away from Netflix. Account sharing, they have a way around that. They're going to, like you said, they're going to start charging people. I think they're going to lose people that way.
Yeah, I agree.
To be honest, I think because for so long, people have been sharing passwords for Netflix and even for other streaming services, they encourage you to share your passwords with other people. I think Netflix has kind of gotten to that point where so many people have it, 220 million people have it, that you're kind of running out of people to market to. And yeah, you may gain some subscribers because, okay, I can't use my mom and dad's Netflix anymore. I have to get my own. I'm sure there are people who are going to do that. But I think there's going to be a lot of people that are just going to say, you know what, I haven't paid for this before. I've pretty much watched everything I want to watch on it. You don't have that much new stuff coming out. Stranger Things just finished, so I don't have to wait for a new episode of Stranger Things. So I think they're going to lose a lot of people that way. I don't think they're going to grow as much as they're expecting to from charging people to, I guess, to share their passwords and, outside of their home. I think maybe if there's, like a tiered version, like, okay, hey, it's $15. If you pay $20, then you can share with someone outside of your house. Okay, that makes a bit more sense to me. But to say you have to buy a whole new subscription if you want to watch, well, no, there's plenty of stuff to watch at other places. And it's sluggish economic growth, sluggish economy. That isn't reversing soon. I'm not an economist, but if that is part of the reason why, and then you're saying, all right, we're going to start charging people more money for something that they were getting for free, and there's competition, I think all of that added together doesn't look good for Netflix's numbers. But like I said, I think they'll do better than they did the previous quarter. I think they'll do better than they've done at the start of the year. Year to date, I think they'll do better. But I don't see them gaining as many. I don't know if you mentioned it, but I think they're saying they plan to add 1 million people in the third quarter, in the next quarter.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of people to add.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how many of that they're expecting to come from, oh, well, I can't use my parents' account, so I guess I got to buy one of my own. I don't know if that's what they're expecting, but I don't see them gaining that many after losing that many. And the majority, or not even all of the things that they listed for reasons why they're not doing well are still happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And funny, I had a poll, I guess a month ago. I had a poll a couple of months ago on Twitter asking, which platform would you choose to go with? And majority of people said Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask me, what would I go with? If it's okay, I can only pay for one because I'm not paying for Netflix right now. I can only pay for one, Disney Plus or Netflix. I'm going Disney Plus because they have more of what I want to watch. They have more original stuff that I want to watch. Maybe when Stranger Things season 5 comes out, okay, yeah, then I will be encouraged to get Netflix. But even then, it might be, I'll do a trial. I'll do a 1-month free trial. I'll watch Stranger Things. And then after that, I'll cancel it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think they have too many things that, come up sporadically to, at least personally for me, to justify what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because I think Disney Plus, they let you share up to like 8 people. I think Amazon Prime might be around that number, maybe like 6 people. So for them to say, hey, we're not going to allow you to share at all. And we don't have Marvel. We don't have Star Wars. We don't have Lord of the Rings. Like, all they really have right now is Stranger Things, and that just finished. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little bit bold for Netflix, but they have to do something, I guess. Right. So we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is kind of the wrong move to focus on account sharing, considering their competitors who are cheaper don't do that right now. And maybe they might eventually when they get to the size of Netflix, but right now there is no punishment for sharing accounts on their competitors. So they're going to be singled out in that as the most expensive option and the one that's the most strict, which I think is just going to annoy a lot of people and get them to say, well, then why would I use this anyways? Also, on top of that, they're going to be losing a lot of their content. A lot of their content is not Netflix original. It's licensed stuff from other companies. And that is every month, more and more stuff is leaving Netflix and going to, HBO or Peacock or all these services that are specifically in the States, I should say, where there's more competition. They're going to their own dedicated platforms, which is definitely going to discourage people from continuing their Netflix subscription. But I guess one thing I'm wondering is, do you think that this is a problem exclusive to Netflix? Or do you think because of this overall competition, all these companies who thought they could be the next Netflix are going to start to experience more sluggish growth just because there's so many more options than just Disney Plus and Amazon and Netflix? Now there's, Universal and Peacock and all these other things, HBO Max, like all these other things where there's going to be content here and content there and content. No one can subscribe to all of these. So I don't know. Is this just a sign that everyone is going to start seeing slowed growth in the near future?
I think to both your questions, the answer is yes. I think everyone is going to start seeing sluggish growth in the future, but I think this is exclusively a problem to Netflix right now because they were the biggest for so long.
Yeah.
They have the most to lose, right? They've kind of not completely reached their ceiling, I won't say that, but they have reached the ceiling. And I think even without competition, they would have they would have started to slow their growth because at a certain point you've saturated the market, right? Mm-hmm. But because they've reached the ceiling and now you have all these competitors popping up, I think because of that, that's why we're seeing such a decline, right? That's why we're seeing almost 1 million people leaving in one quarter. Well, I think it's going to happen to the other companies, but not as drastically. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we're going to see people leaving them, at least not to this number. I think for the most part, they will continue to be, they will continue to grow. And I think there'll be some sort of, leveling off where you look at, the big three or when you look at the big 3 or 4 between HBO, Amazon Prime, Disney, and Netflix, I think at some point we'll see even subscriber numbers throughout all of them. But if that's going to happen, that means Netflix has to lose a lot and the other ones have to gain a lot. So,
Well, the interesting thing about that is one of the biggest issues with Netflix is they spend a lot of money, and obviously so does Disney, right? Disney spends a ton of money on their shows. They even have full feature length movies made by Pixar that they launch day and date on Disney Plus. That is not sustainable for a company like Netflix because Netflix is their only form of revenue. Disney has movies and merchandise and all these other things. Amazon has a gigantic theme parks. Yeah. Amazon has a gigantic business of not just movies, but obviously their web store and their Amazon Web Services for businesses. Like all these companies have so many different ways to make money. Netflix doesn't. So, I think they can weather the storm of having these low prices for a lot longer than Netflix can. And yeah, I think it's going to be tough for people to justify spending that much on Netflix. And I think the only thing I can see them continuing this higher growth is the cheaper tier. If the cheaper tier is cheap enough that people can say, you know what, this is worth it. And we've already seen trends like this in Canada. There's a streaming service called Crave, which actually got cheaper because they used to charge different prices for different tiers. Then they just rolled everything into one tier for a cheaper price, as low as $10 a month, which is around the price of Disney Plus. And before, it used to be like up to $30 a month because they would make you pay for this and pay for that and all these things. And I think a lot of these companies are starting to realize if they want people to subscribe, they can't be $30 a month plans. And Netflix is getting really close to being that, which is kind of an issue they're going to be dealing with because that's their only business.
Yeah, I think a lot is going to depend on this ad-supported tier, this cheaper tier. I think we'll see more growth from that than their, paid sharing plan.
Yeah,
that's what I see being, I guess, the biggest driver of growth for Netflix. But I guess I'll ask the question to you for my poll. If you could only choose one service to stay subscribed to watch for the rest of your life, what would it be?
So yeah, I think I might have been the first one to vote in that poll. And for me, it was Netflix. From what Netflix has released in the past, even though there's a lot less stuff that I've liked, I think the stuff that they've released is better. Like the stuff that I liked on Netflix, I think is much better than the stuff I've liked on Disney Plus or HBO Max or anything like that. So
the Defenders?
Well, the Defenders, but even then, I don't count that just because they lost it to Disney Plus. But yeah, I thought what they did with those shows was fantastic. But even beyond that, what we saw from their movies like Trial Chicago 7, Queen's Gambit, I haven't watched Stranger Things, but the conversation I heard about Stranger Things was way larger than anything I heard about what was going on in Disney Plus, including, Disney Plus has this new Miss Marvel show that's been getting great reviews. But even then, everything I've been hearing is about Stranger Things and how fantastic it was and how much people enjoyed it. So I think when Netflix hits at its best level, I think they're better than everyone else out there. Now, we'll see if that changes with this Lord of the Rings show. I've been saying I would love to see, more Lord of the Rings kind of lore show up on screen. And that's exactly what Amazon is doing. And this is supposed to be one of the most expensive shows ever made. We'll see if they can kind of hit that level that I think I've seen from Netflix in the past. But overall, I don't think anyone has come close to what Netflix has done at their best. But also, Netflix doesn't do their best very often. So it's one of those kind of conundrums of like, oh man, what do you do? Which I think you're starting to see what I do. And I think a lot of people are starting to do is, okay, something's released on Netflix. I'll subscribe to Netflix for this month. And then next month I'll subscribe to HBO Max. And then next month I'll subscribe to Disney Plus. I don't think people are keeping all their subscriptions open at all times. I think a lot of people are switching between them. But what about you? Which is the one? I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, but which is the one that you'd be with like, okay, this is the one I'm stuck with forever?
Disney Plus.
Yeah, I figured.
Disney Plus for sure. Like, yes, Stranger Things was great, but as you said, they don't always produce a Stranger Things.
Yeah.
That's a very, once in a I guess, couple of years thing.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, Stranger Things is ending next season. So after Stranger Things, what are you going to do to keep people invested?
Yeah.
Squid Game was great, but once again, doesn't happen often. Disney Plus, I would say, not everything is as great as Stranger Things season 4. Not everything is as great as, you know, as Squid Game, but they consistently put out good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Consistently. I mean, right now we're in a bit of a lull when it comes to Disney stuff or Disney Plus stuff, but they've been pretty good at, okay, when one show finishes, the next show starts next week. When that show finishes, the next one starts. When this show finishes, we have a movie coming out. Then we have another show starting the week afterwards. So they've been pretty good at giving people a reason to invest in it or invest their time, their money subscribing to it. And same thing, Amazon. The Boys, this past season of The Boys was amazing. It was a great season, but it's done. And now what? We're waiting 2-3 months between the ending of The Boys and The Lord of the Rings to start, which is, that's kind of what TV is. But I think Disney's pacing with their streaming service is what is so significant compared to the other companies out there.
Yeah.
And maybe the pacing is because, as you said, they have a lot of other sources of income, right? When we talk about, okay, hey, they're making a lot of Marvel shows, but they have blockbuster Marvel movies coming out every so often. They have their theme parks, which print money nonstop, and they have all the merchandise, right? I don't know if there's Stranger Things action figures or not, but definitely not merchandise to the level of Disney.
Yeah.
I would like to see Pokemon launch their own streaming service.
Oh, wow.
I think that would be very competitive.
Well,
just in terms of merchandise and putting stuff out.
You know what? I know Nintendo and Pokemon are technically two different companies, but Nintendo, I think, is hinting at the fact that they're going to be starting their own movie studio where they're going to be producing their own projects. Yes. So who knows? Maybe this could be, with your Nintendo online subscription, maybe they release a streaming service where they have exclusive Pokemon shows and movies and Mario and Zelda and stuff like that going forward, which could be quite interesting. I don't know.
Could be. All right. Our final topic of the day. Hyundai recently revealed 2 new concept cars, which is their vision of the future. One is called the RN22E, and the other is called an Envision 74. They're calling these their 2 Roland Lab concepts. Now, the RN22E uses Hyundai's innovative electric global modular platform, their EGMP, with the Ioniq 6's body and design. So it's a familiar design, but they're making it an EV, an electric vehicle. So it's not brand new, but it is a significant vehicle for them. The one that I find more interesting is their Envision 74, which is a high-performance hydrogen fuel cell hybrid model inspired by both their Hyundai N2025 Vision Gran Turismo, which was another fuel cell-powered car, and their Hyundai Pony Coupe concept from 1974. Now, these 2 cars are kind of what their vision of the future is. It's their Roland Labs because this is what they think the future is going to be. They've created these cars to kind of test to see, okay, how does this EV perform in terms of just everyday driving, in terms of, I was going to say fuel consumption, but I guess electric energy consumption, and how it performs on a track, how it is actually performance-wise. They aren't confirmed yet for commercial production, but they've released some teaser trailers. They've released some photos. So they're very exciting looking cars. And I think there's a lot of buzz around what they're doing. But I guess my question to you is, what are your thoughts on these 2 cars, these 2 Roland Lab vehicles? What are your thoughts on the EV, the fuel cell vehicle? And do you think we'll actually see this one day? I mean, a lot of times we get these concepts that look amazing and, we're going to, this is going to be our drag coefficient and this is going to be our range. And we're going to use a fuel cell for the power source, but then they don't pan out to anything. So do you think that these are actually going to at some point go into production, or is this is this just Hyundai trying to drum up some excitement around their brand?
So specifically with the Envision 74, no, I don't think that's something that we will ever see. And it's very cool. Like you mentioned, it's based off of their Pony Coupe from 1974. And, this is intended to be their vision for the next 5 years. Like you mentioned, it's going to be a hydrogen electric plug-in hybrid. So the interesting thing about this is generally with hydrogen fuel cell cars, they're very slow. Just because of the way that the hydrogen fuel cell works, it's not something that you can get a ton of power out right away. So what Hyundai is trying to do here is, okay, you can fuel up this vehicle in 5 minutes because hydrogen fuels up very fast, but then that hydrogen is used to charge the batteries. And there's going to be a 62.4 kilowatt hour battery as the base of this concept vehicle that can produce just over 600 miles of range and can do 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. So that's very unheard of for a traditional hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, because what this car is doing is, like I mentioned, it's using that hydrogen fuel, that cell, to charge the batteries. And then those batteries are discharging those electric motors in the vehicle. So essentially you're getting that electric car performance, but getting the benefit of getting the quick fuel time of a hydrogen vehicle, and also having a zero emissions vehicle at the same time. Now, I don't think this is going to work out for a couple of reasons. One, this car looks way too cool to ever be real. And, it kind of carries the pixel design of the Ioniq line. It's something that we saw originally in the Ioniq 5, which is a vehicle I love, also based off of their pony car from their past, but, a much more modern design. And I think it looks incredibly cool. But, hydrogen fuel cell, there are a few cars that exist to this day, but they're not very popular. Hydrogen is a very expensive fuel, way more than electricity and way more than gas even now. And it's not all that practical. There's no hydrogen fuel stations. And for that to change within the next 5 years, I don't really see that happening. It's already been kind of an uphill battle to get electric charging stations everywhere. And that's way more common than anything like hydrogen. So yeah, I as much as I think this is a really, really cool concept, I don't necessarily think that this is the direction we're actually going to see Hyundai go, even though that's what they're looking for. That being said, I could imagine seeing some of these things, because these two concepts that you mentioned are the future of their N line, which is their performance vehicles. And I could potentially see something like this trickle down into an electric Veloster at some point in the future, or an electric Elantra in the future, the N versions of those vehicles. For me, though, one of the more exciting one is, well, the other concept is based on their Ioniq 6, which is something that they just unveiled to the world. It was based on a concept that they had in the past, but this Ioniq 6 that they showed off is their actual production vehicle. And to me, it looks insane. I don't necessarily know if I like the design, but it looks like nothing else I've ever seen. And so the Ioniq 6 is a little different than the Ioniq 5. The Ioniq 5 was a bit of a crossover kind of hatchback kind of vehicle. The Ioniq 6 is going to be a 4-door design with a very swooping design, and Hyundai calls it a streamliner. So it kind of looks almost like a coupe, but a 4-door coupe. It has a drag coefficient of 0.21, which is just 0.01 more than the EQS, which had the previous title of the lowest drag coefficient. It starts with a 54 kilowatt hour battery, goes up to a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery, which means that it can go up to 621 or so kilometers of range. And all these vehicles have this really cool technology that Hyundai uses in their vehicles, which has 350 kilowatt fast charging, which can get you from 10 to 80% in 18 minutes. So, the base of this concept vehicle, the Ioniq 6, to me, I think is a really, really cool car. It's actually going to launch to customers. That's not a concept. And it's going to come out hopefully as early as next year. Now, the concept that is based off is what they predict like their first N electric vehicle is going to be like. And this is significant because there is going to be an N version of the Ioniq 5 that's supposed to come out very soon. And, we could see performance, similar to what we might have seen from like Mustang Mach-E performance version where, a much faster, much more enjoyable vehicle to drive. And the N line for Hyundai's tended to be like a track car that is much more engaging and much more fun to drive. Generally, in the past, with their gas powered vehicles, they've had manual iterations of it so that, people who really enjoy driving get like that really engaging kind of feel when they're driving the car.
Mhm.
How that translates to an electric car, still remains to be seen. I think we have to kind of see these things on the road. I think the first look we'll get from that is the Ioniq 5 version, but overall, everything that they've shown off here, I got to give them credit because, like I said, I don't know if I like the Ioniq 6. The back, I think, is amazing. It looks fantastic from the back. It looks like a futuristic car with all the pixel light bar that goes across it and like it has this light up spoiler.
And
Yeah, that's just a big light and it looks insane. The front, I think, is incredibly ugly. But, it does have really cool lights as well. So it's this mixed bag, but overall, they're unlike anything that we've seen. It's not like a Tesla. It's not like a Mercedes, or it's just completely their own. And I got to give them credit for that. And it makes me really excited about what they're doing in the future. And I think they could, start to challenge as, the best EV manufacturer going forward, just because they're taking it seriously, clearly. And they're getting a lot of people really excited about it based on what we've seen from these vehicles that they've shown off. But I don't know. It's cool to see. I guess the one thing that has me kind of questioning this line, specifically because they're focusing on their end version of their vehicles, is I've known you've driven a Veloster N in the past, and you mentioned like, oh yeah, it's a really fun vehicle. Does it concern you at all that the N line could be going electric relatively soon? Maybe they might, drop their more traditional gas powered N vehicles. Do you think it's the right move? And like, how do you feel about these cars altogether, including the base Ioniq 6 that could be coming out as early as next year?
the Ioniq 6 looks really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have as much of a problem with it as you do. I think it looks really nice all around. I'm not too worried about the N line.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, I don't think we're getting full electric not anytime, but that soon. I know in the past we've talked about, Audi and Ford and all these companies saying we're going to be fully electric by whatever, 2030. Or I think some people even said 2025. If I'm thinking back on it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's good PR move.
Yeah.
Good to say we're working towards it. That's not going to happen. I don't think those companies are ready for it. I don't think the, EV charging network is ready for it. I don't think consumers are ready for it. I do think we are moving towards EVs, but even in terms of like, not even, the N line from Hyundai, if we're talking luxury vehicles, if we're talking Porsche, if we're talking Ferrari, we're talking Mercedes, I don't see them just completely giving up their gas powered vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say if a company like that decides that, hey, as of 2025, clock hits midnight, we are not selling any more gas powered vehicles. What are you going to do with all those gas powered vehicles you already have? And what if people that normally buy your cars don't want to buy electric vehicles? What if they're not ready yet? Then what are you going to do? You're just going to send them to your competition, right? I see EVs being the future for sure. I've said that plenty of times, but I don't think we're going full EV, especially for things like the N line. I see if companies do switch to, EV everything, I still see them having a racing line, a performance line that is still gas powered.
Mm-hmm.
I still see that being a thing, especially when you look at, the Veloster N, when you look at, like the Civic Type R, when you look at those kind of cars where it's like, these are performance cars for the everyday person. I don't see those moving away from gas powered vehicles because I know there's still going to be a market for it. And if there's still going to be a market for it, I'm sure that someone's going to capitalize on that market. I could see them having, as you said, an N variant to their vehicles, but I don't see them going completely EV with it. I do like the RN22E, the one based off the Ioniq 6. I like how it looks. I like the extra spoiler. I like the extra body flares. I like it better than the Ioniq 6, but I'm not worried about, I guess, gas vehicles or gas performance vehicles going away anytime soon.
Mhm.
for sure, right? Like even if Porsche converts their entire lineup, they're still going to have a 911 turbo that's gas because people want a 911 turbo that's gas.
Yeah.
I guess between these two vehicles, the Envision 74, the RN22E, which one would you be more interested if someone from Hyundai walks up to you, you have to drive one of these cars as your daily driver, which one would you be more interested in?
Envision 74, 100%. It looks way too cool. Like
Hmm.
it looks like something that I would have been driving in like Cyberpunk 2077. Um, and yeah, I love it. Other than like I said, I do like the Ioniq 6. I think the back of that vehicle, including the RN22E, is amazing. And I don't necessarily have a huge problem with the design. It's just the Envision 74 looks almost perfect in my opinion. It has
Hmm.
that almost perfect traditional kind of old school design. I think late 60s, early 70s, especially coupes are some of the best designed cars of all time, simply because uh, a lot of the reason is the restrictions in terms of laws were a lot more lax back then in terms of safety. So you could have things, you could have cars designed in a way back then that, could potentially endanger someone's life, but just looked cool, which you can't do today. So,
Yeah, unfortunately.
yeah. So unfortunately, that's why Mustangs don't look as cool as maybe like a late '60s Mustang. But it's just really cool. The one thing I will say though is that the difference between the Ioniq 6, the Ioniq 5, and this Envision 74 concept is the Ioniq 5 and this Envision 74 wasn't designed with efficiency in mind, where the Ioniq 6 was. And I think that's a key because this is an actual production vehicle. And the
Hmm.
N22E, the RN22E, which is based on the Ioniq 6, I wouldn't be surprised if that vehicle exists in some fashion just because it's based off of a vehicle that's actually going to be in production. And it's meant to be efficient. This Envision 74 concept, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the most efficient. So even if it does have, you know, a 62.4 kilowatt hour battery, I don't know if you're really getting that mileage that you would really want from an electric vehicle, especially because it's meant to be a performance vehicle, which means you're going to be driving it pretty hard. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it's just one of those things that begs a question. Once again, it goes down to design over function. So yeah, I would definitely choose that model, but I think there's going to be a lot of, if something like that ever did exist, there's going to be a lot of sacrifices for that really cool design. But how about you? Are you as in love with the Envision 74 concept as me, or is the RN22?
Definitely.
Okay, okay.
Definitely Envision 74. Do you think that, okay, as you said before, hydrogen fuel isn't necessarily the most economical fuel source?
Mhm.
There aren't really any like just hydrogen fuel stations laying around. It's expensive, more expensive than electric, more expensive than gas. Do you see them coming out with a version of this that is a gas powered hybrid? So
Hmm.
you still get like the instant torque of an electric vehicle. You still get, some of that power of a combustion engine. And you could still say, okay, hey, electric if your electric engine or if your electric battery is running out, you can use gas power and then you can charge the battery through gas to get that extra range. Because we've said before in the past when we were talking about the RAV4 hybrid how actually this is a lot more economical fuel wise than a lot of Teslas are,
Yeah.
right? So full EV may not be the way to go. Hybrid between gas and EV may actually be the future that's going to happen a lot sooner than full EV. Do you see them saying, "Hey, we have this hybrid, but instead of a fuel source that nobody is going to pay for, why don't we use a fuel source that is readily available? There's plenty of fueling stations around. People are used to charging or used to fueling up at gas stations. And we have a car design that people seem to love, and we can get our hybrid out." Do you see that as a possibility? And if you do, how soon would you buy one?
Oh man. So my heart says, oh man, I would hope so, because that is like to me the best option in terms of a
Mhm.
vehicle like this being an actual hybrid, a gas hybrid. But my brain says there's no way, simply because this is a bigger vehicle than something like the Veloster, which means it's going to be a more expensive vehicle. And people just don't buy two-door coupes. Like, in order for this to exist, it would have to be like a really, really expensive car along the lines of like, you know, a Boxster, or it would have to be in a completely different price bracket than Hyundai normally works in.
I don't know. People buy BRZs. People buy Supras.
Yeah, they do, but they don't sell particularly well. I mean, no one is going to say I'm going to get a BRZ as like a family car. That's generally going to be someone's fun car.
Oh no, not a family car.
Yeah,
this isn't a family car.
No,
but N74.
But that's what I mean. Is like the market for people who are willing to get a vehicle like this is very, very small. It's the reason why the Roadster still doesn't exist. The Tesla Roadster is because someone will much sooner buy a Tesla Model S Plaid than they would a Tesla Roadster.
I also think that they just have issues putting cars out when they say they're going to.
True, but at the same time, they announced that Plaid like a year and a half before it launched. And they got that out relatively quickly for Tesla. And they were able to get that performance that they were, touting for the Roadster in that Tesla Model S vehicle, because they know that's the vehicle that people are going to buy. As cool as the Roadster looks, more people, a million times more people are going to buy a Model S Plaid than
I
a Roadster.
think Tesla just has trouble making cars. Like, why haven't they sold? What about the Cybertruck? That would be the best-selling truck in North America, possibly. They sold out very quickly. I'm sure they'd have a lot of people wanting to buy the Cybertruck, but still not out.
Maybe
I think Tesla just has problems making cars and sticking to deadlines. I don't think we could use them as a litmus test, I guess, for the car industry.
I mean, maybe you might be right there. It's just a fact, like even the BRZ and the 76 or the 86, those have to exist as cars that are partnerships. Like Toyota couldn't make that car on their own. They'd lose millions upon millions, possibly even billions of dollars. So the only reason that car exists is because Subaru and Toyota could work together on it. Same thing with the Supra and the BMW it's based off of. Those cars don't exist unless there's a partnership, especially in that under $60,000 tier, which if this car existed specifically made by Hyundai and only Hyundai, or just Hyundai and Kia, this would have to be like an $80,000 to $100,000 car. And I just don't see them doing anything like that. So
what about like a $60,000 car?
I still don't think it works out. I think at the end of the day, if they want to make a car like this, they're quicker to make an upgraded Veloster and or the Elantra, which has been their Halo car right now. The Elantra N is their Halo performance car right now because it's a 4-door sedan. And there's kind of even more attention put towards that than there is on the Veloster, just because that's more of a practical vehicle that people are willing to spend the money for. So yeah, it's the same thing with the Civic, right? It's just the reality of like these cars just aren't popular anymore. And even sedans aren't really popular anymore. Everything is bigger vehicles, SUVs, more space, hatchbacks. Like that's what people want. So yeah, it's going to be kind of hard to imagine them ever putting a car like this on the road.
I'm going against the record, saying that I disagree. I think, bold prediction, we are going to get this Envision 74 gas hybrid in the next 5 years.
I hope so. I hope so. If we do, I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a LFA kind of a situation where it's such an expensive car that no one like it becomes incredibly rare and it's kind of a flop, but it's just everyone 10 years down the line talk about how it was one of the coolest cars ever made. And
what's your price estimate?
Over $100,000.
Over? All right.
Yeah.
Everyone listening, you heard it here first. Envision 74 gas hybrid coming out in 5 years under $100,000. I'm calling it. I don't know if I could place that kind of a bet in Vegas, but I'm gonna do some research and get back to you guys.
They got bets for everything.
Yeah, bets for everything. I guess any closing statements?
No, it's just gonna be cool to see what Hyundai does in the future. I think between them, Kia, and Genesis make some of the coolest vehicles in the past few years. So yeah, kind of really on board with what they're doing.
Yeah. Take it easy, everyone in podcast land.
Catch you in the next episode.